Alright everybody, inside of Nuke we're going to start this whole process here. So we're going to have a few node trees going on. Well, not node trees, just one. But we're going to be basing it off of this EXR that we need to bring in. So I hit R down at the bottom there in the node graph to bring these up. And I'm going to go search for the file of the EXR that we're going to work with today. So I have the Mila passes in its own folder. Going to bring that EXR in. And hit open, and there we go, there's our file. And I'm going to kind of think ahead for cleaning up as I work, and I want to give myself enough space to set that out and lay everything out. Now here's the render that we did inside of Maya based off of the Mila underscore passes. I'm showing you this so that you see again where we're working from. We did the whole batch render process, which is what you're going to have to do for anything that you're sending out from Maya on over. So there's some of the naming that I did inside of the render settings. I'm going to go ahead and cancel the batch render. And the naming that I did changed. So for the shadow layer, I selected the name, changed it, right-clicked on there, and I'm doing it again for the Mila pass, so that it will retain the naming convention per render layer. So if I right-click and go to create layer override, that is specific to that layer pass. So now you're going to see that I select the Mia passes and the shadow passes, and the names remain the same, shadow pass and Mila passes, and I don't have to worry about them changing if I change one for each render. They are now a part of those render layers, and they will always render out as the correct name, opposed to how I changed it to Mila passes. My shadow was showing up as Mila passes as well. So if I were to render both of them out at the same time, they would both have the same name, although they should be in separate folders. One render will go into the shadow folder, the other render will go into the Mila underscore passes folder. So that's one thing that we need to take note of. And when you're working, you do want to have things, in the best order that you can put them into. And sometimes renaming sequences isn't very conventional, although there are programs that we could use like Adobe Bridge to do it. So we're going to go in here and just kind of check a few things. Giving this another name, specifically for the changes that I made during the Mila passes process. And now back to Nuke. We have our read node, which is, again, the EXR that contains all of the channels which hold the information that we sent out from Maya via passes. So that one file is pretty amazing, because then we have everything all on one shot here. Okay, there's the shadow as it comes through. You'd be able to bring that over. I'm not going to mess with it just yet, so I'll put it to the side here. But again, it's the merge processes that we can do, like the read one node over, merging it over the read two node to have them layered. And in this case, I didn't render out the ground by itself, so I'd have to, layer these over the original, or I could even just go and render out the ground so that I have a separate render for the ground, a separate render for the shadow, and a separate render for the sphere itself, but have all those reflections and everything else going on in there. So I'm making a unpremult node, and again, that's to undo the process of the alpha channel being multiplied by the color channel, as we spoke about in class. I create a shuffle node, and the shuffle node is where we're going to be able to pull the specific render pass out via one of the channels from the read one node, which is the render from Maya, the EXR file. So I'm just organizing my scene, and you guys are going to want to do something like this in order to see where each path flows to. Okay, so my downstream to my shuffle node is nice and clean, and I don't have to worry about things zigzagging and crossing each other and trying to figure out where all these branches are heading to when I have multiple nodes in here, or when I add any other nodes. And you're seeing that I'm taking my merge and I am bringing it across to where it splits out from my read node down that stream to the little dot that I created before the premult node, and it goes out around to the shuffle node, and that allows me to composite one thing over the original basically. So I'm merging it above the original in this case, or I guess you could think of it that way. Now inside of here, what I did is the in channel, I changed that to direct diffuse in the shuffle node. And what that allows me to do is to solo out that channel, and you're seeing as I do the mix is going to be between 100% that channel down to the original basically, so what's below it. So a mix of 0% or 100%, kind of like an opacity in After Effects if you want to think of it that way. I also changed the mode to plus. Okay, so in the merge node I have plus going on as my operation, and that is an additive property. So plus is like add inside of After Effects. So I copied the shuffle and the merge node, and then I just pasted them in order to, not have to make the nodes individually and keep reconnecting these separate nodes. And all I'm doing is taking each shuffle node and loading the next render pass, in this case the indirect diffuse. And that one is also set to plus, and then you can see as I drag the slider what it's affecting. So the indirect diffuse is affecting the indirect, basically the indirect lighting that's coming in onto this. So I could select these nodes and hit D, the D key, and that is in order to allow me to deactivate these. I can select them again and hit the D key, as in David, to reactivate them. Okay. When there's no X's on there, they are activated, and you can see that I can now paste another copy, and I didn't recopy those, I just hit Control V again to paste them. And I'm going to go to the direct diffuse pass. Oh, I actually have that. So I'm going to the glossy, and this is the direct glossy. And the direct glossy is going to be over the other two passes. And you want to think of that way. So we're kind of stacking in a strange order. If you're used to the Adobe products, they stack top to bottom. In this case, we're kind of thinking in a stacking order, even though we're using nodes, and we're stacking from the bottom to top. So it's working its way from the bottom up because we're doing the whole A over B process. So this fourth node, for instance, is going to be my indirect glossy. And so that's loaded in there now as the shuffle 4 node, and the merge 4 node is the process, kind of showing us what we have going on there. That little mix slider. And it's set to plus because I had, copied and pasted it when it was set to plus. So every time I'm working with a separate file, I'm double clicking it so that you guys can see in the properties tab, that is what I have loaded. So I have to double click each one of them to load them and work with them individually. Right here, I'm just kind of moving things around because it was hard for me to get that little dot in there because the shuffle node was too close to the other nodes. So I put my ambient occlusion in there, but plus is the wrong operation for my ambient occlusion. It needs to be something like multiply, or something that's going to work with the darker values of a layer. I'm sorry, a node in this case. So my mix, you can see that it's adding the dark of the ambient occlusion, which is going to bring out our shadows. It's going to bring out our crevices or creases, those different things where we need that nice definition. It also adds a bit of beauty to it. So now I have my node tree that I'm going to be working with, and they're all in a specific order. So if you did different render passes, then you're going to want to think ahead, and as you're working, you might go and create some other passes and bring it in here, and that's okay. You could just really, take that read one node and replace it at any time with any of the other passes that you want to bring in. But depending on the pass, then that's going to also depend on how you stack these or how you connect these nodes. Okay, I'm making an unpremult node for each one of these because, again, it's pulling from the original down to separate branches. So the first unpremult node that I made is not going to affect these other ones. So I do want to have that operation undone so that it does take away the alpha being multiplied by the RGB channel, if you will. At the very end, I put a premult node, which tells it to run that operation of premultiplying the alpha channel by the red, green, and blue channel, and that will cut away any of the alpha mats, if you will. I want to think of them that way, in each one of these shuffle nodes, which is basically kind of like having an EXR, that EXR over an EXR over an EXR. So that's basically what we're doing without having to have a bunch of different separate render passes and such. So you see me, all I did is turn everything down under my mix attribute in the properties, and I am leveling them as I deem fit, basically, to get a pretty good solid look here and make this thing look a little bit more, you know, unique, and maybe get the style that I'm going for, or get the look that I'm going for. Or if I'm trying to match a scene and I'm trying to match the lighting of that scene, then I can play with some of these mix nodes and such, and later on I'll add grade nodes and maybe color correction nodes or different things like that in order to get the look that I'm going for. Again, these are just nodes, and you're going to use them when they're beneficial for you. You're also going to be able to play with these and try them out, and if it's not working for you, you could delete them at any time. So I'm just trying to dial something in here for each channel, and I probably should use a little more proper terminology, but I'm trying to dial in the mix here per each node as they go downstream in order to get the look that I'm going for. So again, I kind of just move this over to make room for the grade node. And I'm trying to keep these things nice and neat. And the grade node, again, this is just to show you that I can take the ambient occlusion pass in this case, and if I mess with the multiply on it, you're seeing what it's doing inside of my scene. I'll right click and go to revert knobs. That sets it back to when I first created this node, or when I first selected it in this case. And if I mess with the gain a little bit, you see that the sun's hotspot isn't so blown out. So I have some options here, and I have a lot that I can kind of work with in order to, you know, get or achieve a certain type of look, or maybe in this case even a type of day, as that one was bringing it down to where it almost looked like a night shot. And this is, again, all dependent on the footage that I have going on there, or if I'm going for an artistic style. In our case, we're trying to match the footage with a 3D track. So you shot your film first, and then you did your 3D track, got a match plate, went to Maya, created your objects or brought your objects in, put your materials on there and your lighting and all that stuff, rendered it out, brought it back in here, and now you're trying to composite it so where it looks like it belongs in the scene, like it was there the day you shot the rest of the footage that you did shoot and that you're working with. And this is pretty cool. Very powerful.